is on.
Okay, and with that, are we all set to go ahead and start and open the meeting? Christine? Looks like it. Oh, looks like Eric just came, so I think we've got everybody here. So we'll go ahead and we'll call the special work session to order. And what we'll do is go ahead and start. If we could maybe do some introductions, and let's start with the board, and maybe tell us if you have kids and what age they are in school, and then maybe share a quick bright spot. We'll keep it positive of this time during quarantine. So I'll start. I'm Sue Hecker. I've been on the board for 13 years, and I have 2 kids that have graduated from Sherwood High, and then one that is a senior this year. And I would say our bright spot has been a lot of great cooking, because we're sharing that. And I love all the card playing and games. I think they're getting old for my kids though. So Jessica, do you want to go next?
Sure, thanks, Sue. So Jessica Adamson, I'm a board member. I have 3 kids, 2 of whom are graduated, but one's still in high school. And the bright spot that we're having is getting to see a lot more art projects around the house. Sam's taking an art class this term, and so Sue, you can probably see his art projects, some weird bamboo poles tied together with long grass. That was his today's art project assignment that's hanging out on the back porch.
Okay, Eric, and then Mike. Eric? Okay, Mike, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Mike Highland. I'm on my 3rd year on the board. I've had 4 kids go through the Sherwood School District, and they are all out. So I'm kind of the old man here. Thank you, hon. I'm getting deliveries as we speak. As far as bright spots, I mean, yeah, it's nice. We seem to be spending a little bit more time together as a family because we sort of have to. But that's the nice part. The kids are maybe not so thrilled all the time, but it's great for us. But yeah, thank you. That's it.
Awesome. Okay, Eric, are you here? Okay, he's hiding. He was here, but I think he's hiding. Nicole.
All right, so I'm Nicole. I have one that just graduated last year, and then a current freshman. And so this is my 2nd year on the budget committee. And I think our bright spot is probably having time to pick up new skills. I'm not super musical, but I'm trying to learn how to play guitar. And my marching band kid, who loves the tuba, is working on the electric bass. So there's been a lot more music in our house, which has been fun.
Awesome. Okay, and Jake.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Sorry, my computer doesn't allow the camera. So my name is Jake. I'm volunteering on the board. I have 2 sons. One is 13, and he will be going into be a freshman next year. And then my youngest is 9, both in Sherwood schools. And there's actually a lot of bright spots. I don't have to commute to Hillsborough because the requirements that are going on. I get to spend a lot more time with my kids, and since we're all stuck at home, we decided to get a puppy and really spice it up.
Awesome. Okay, and Ryan.
Yeah, so Ryan Dunlap. So this is my 2nd year on the budget committee as well. I just got done with the boundary committee, which was actually pretty exciting, pretty fun. We've got 3 kids here in the Sherwood School District, 2 of which one is in 1st grade, one's in 3rd grade, and then we also have a 3-year-old. So we'll spend lots more years in the Sherwood School District. One thing that's exciting or kind of fun for us is the nice weather. So we've spent a lot of time just going for walks around the neighborhood and just kind of getting some fresh air, or having the kids go outside and get fresh air. So we've been looking forward to the sunshine that we've had so far this year.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for your service on that last committee. Oh my gosh. Actually,
Yeah.
you guys knocked it out of the park, frankly. That was amazing. Okay, awesome. William, you want to tell us about yourself?
There. Yeah, so Bill Fox, new to the budget committee this year. So I look forward to helping out. And I have two kids, 5 and 6. My son will be going into first grade this year. He's just finishing up kindergarten, and then my daughter will start kindergarten this upcoming school year. So exciting there. And bright spot, we're healthy. We're doing good. So that's nice. I like that. And just spending more time at home. I think that's trying and also a bright spot.
Awesome. Amen. Okay. Oops, I just muted myself. Sorry. And Roger, you could tell us about yourself. That'd be great.
Thanks, Sue. So Roger Clough. I'm new to the budget committee this year, but my second rodeo. So I've been through it a little bit before. I have 4 kids who have all gone through the Sherwood School District program. I have one left who's a junior this year. And I guess my bright spot is that this has forced all my kids to get jobs, which has been nice. So they're all working.
That's awesome. Okay, thank you. And I'll have actually the district team introduce themselves, and you guys are pros, so I'll let you just kind of pass the baton to each other. And obviously, thank you all for being here tonight. And obviously, the budget isn't what we anticipated probably when you signed up, but we'll go from there. So I'll turn it over to Heather to introduce.
Thank you. This is Heather. I'm superintendent, and I'm very thankful for your service. And thank you for being here in this meeting this evening. And before I go too much further, I just want to wish Christine a happy birthday. And as always, really great job orchestrating all of the many moving pieces for a live stream meeting. So, and I'm sure there are so many parts about this birthday that seem very odd, but this is just probably one of them. I am finishing my 10th year as superintendent in the Sherwood School District, and a bright spot for me, similar to Bill's, is that my family is healthy. My husband's a first responder, and he and his crews have gone on many, many, many very sick COVID patients. And so we're just, every morning he goes, when he's on duty, they take all their temperatures before they walk into their stations. And when they leave the next day or 2 days later, they take it again. So there's good monitoring, and I'm just thankful for that.
Hi, this is Gary Bennett. I'm the assistant superintendent. I'm finishing my 11th year in Sherwood, serving as the principal of Sherwood Middle School, then the chief academic officer, and then ultimately the assistant superintendent. I have 2 kids. I have a senior in high school who is graduating this year, and I have a freshman in high school. They both go in the Sunset High School in the Beaverton School District. And a bright spot for us has just been, I think there's 2, one that we're all healthy, and 2 that we've just got to spend a lot of time together. And life has slowed down without sports and activities at the high school level, and it means a lot more time as a family. So that's been great. Although I wish all the sports and things were back. I'd take it in a heartbeat, but I'm looking at the bright side.
Yeah. Amen. Yes.
I can go next. I'm Steve Everett. I'm the Executive Director of Human Resources for the Sherwood School District. And I'm finishing my 13th year in the district, and this is my 5.5, I guess, anniversary in this role. And so I was building principal prior to that. I can think of many bright spots, but I think the one that I'll call out tonight is just how truly cool it's been to watch our staff, both classified and licensed staff throughout the district, come together and just make great things happen for kids over these past few weeks. And it's been a lot of hard work, and no one has shied away from it. So that's been pretty awesome.
Great, thank you. Yeah. Okay. Jim?
This is Jim, and I'll go next. Jim Rose. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for the school district. I have 2 kids in the district, a 7th grader at Laurel Ridge and a 5th grader at Middleton. And they are the bright spot for me, just getting to spend more time with them. I didn't have a long commute. It's typically about 10 minutes, and now it's like 10 feet. So it's really great to spend even just that much more time with my kids. A lot of Uno and a lot of campfires and s'mores. It's been a lot of fun. So thanks.
Awesome. Phil, Christine?
I will go. Phil Johansson, Director of Fiscal Services. I've been with the district 6 years. Dating myself, but the youngest of our 4 children graduated from college in 2011. And then bright spot has been for about the last 2 weeks, I get regular text, and attached to it is a photo of our less than 2-week-old Texas-born grandson.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. And I think, Christine, are you last on this? Okay.
I'm Christine. I'm the Executive Assistant to the Superintendent, the Board Secretary, and the Public Information Officer for the school district, so also known as the wearer of all the hats. And I've been with the district not quite 2 years, no kids in the district, but for me, the bright spot has really just been seeing the great work that's being done by a lot of our student services and support departments, and getting to work closely with them in ways that I haven't before. So like Share Center, nutrition services, just a lot of the great work that's kind of happening, continuing to happen throughout the district has been really cool to see. And just the dedication of those staff members is just really admirable.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I think there's so much that everyone in the district is doing. It's hard to even talk about without getting emotional. So I won't go there this early, but it's just been amazing to watch. And I'm sorry it's had to go this way, but I know we're going to learn a lot of great things from it. So with that, I will go ahead and turn over the meeting to Dr. Cordy.
Thank you. So before we start in on our presentation, and Jim Rose will be leading that with assists from Phil, I just want to set the stage for our time together this evening. So just as a reminder, this is our orientation meeting, and this is we typically in typical years do this a little bit earlier in the year, but for various reasons, here we are. And the focus tonight is to go over the roles and just remind and do some teaching about the roles and responsibilities of the Budget Committee, talk about the work that had been done prior to the pandemic, specifically related to the student investment account and the funds that we were planning on and are still hoping for from as a result of the corporate activity tax. And then we really want to spend the majority of the time, though, talking about what it is we've been learning recently about what is to come and the general fund budget challenges that we are all going to start bracing for and preparing for, with lots of question marks throughout that whole presentation. But want to really get this committee up to speed on all of those pieces. So with that, I'll hand it off to Mr. Rose.
Thank you, Superintendent Cordy. I'm going to launch from my other computer the presentation. So that's why you see a JP field on your screen that some of you are probably going, well, who's JP? Well, that's short for Jim's presentation computer. Sorry, it's gonna take me just a moment. Or not. Well, that computer has, okay, it's frozen on me. Let's see if I can, Christine, are you able to shut that computer off from the live stream or from the presentation?
How about I just present?
How about that? Thank you so much. That's great.
It's up now. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. So good evening and welcome again to our budget committee orientation. And just a reminder, please do mute your microphones when not speaking, but we would ask that you leave your cameras on so we can see everyone. One of the considerations in preparing our orientation for tonight is recognizing that this may be a brand new experience to some and a repeat for most. However, this year we are all on the same footing. None of us have gone through a budget development process during a pandemic with schools closed for the remainder of the year. Currently, there are more questions than answers. In spite of these circumstances, we deem it best to continue to orient the budget committee regarding its role and the budget development process. Tonight, we're going to share what we know. We're also going to disclose what we don't know. And then we're going to describe how we'll proceed until our financial picture becomes more clear. And we've been told it may be the September economic and revenue forecast before we fully know the potential impact. We fully recognize the duality of trying to move through our normal process at a time when we have so much that is unknown. This is just unprecedented budget development times for us. And with that, we'll go over the topics we intend to touch on tonight. These are typically the items discussed during our budget committee orientation, with one notable exception, the exception being that second item from the bottom responding to coronavirus. Some may ask why even include a discussion of the March forecast, and that's a valid question. I will tell you now that we will not spend a great deal of time on the March forecast. However, within that forecast are a couple of items that may come into play in addressing the response to the coronavirus, and they may even help. As always, we will hold some time at the end for questions, but you are welcome to ask at any time. And again, Christine showed how to raise your hand, and we will make sure that we get to you as quickly as we can. Next slide, Christine, please. First off, we recognize that there will be changes to this budget. However, we have a legal responsibility to pass a budget by June 30th. We know we will have to adjust this budget, though we are trying to do our best to be as accurate as we can with the initial try. The reality is there are many unknowns. To meet that legal requirement to pass a budget for next year, this committee has some specific roles that I will outline here. A budget committee is a group of school board members and an equal number of citizens that reviews the district's proposed budget. The role of the budget committee is to receive the budget message and the budget document from the superintendent, which you will do at the next meeting on June 1st. The budget committee is the means for the public to participate in the budgeting process. The public is encouraged to attend because one of the most important purposes of the committee is to take comments and questions from interested citizens. Next slide, thank you. The budget committee reviews the proposal to ensure that the district is planning to spend money in furtherance of expressly stated district goals. The committee approves the budget at the major fund and function level and sets the tax rate. Once complete, the budget committee refers the budget to the school board. The school board will then hold a public hearing and adopt the budget. The budget committee does not approve new personnel, set salaries, benefits, or contract terms for employees or administrators. It is also outside the committee's scope of work to set staffing levels or decide whether or not a service or program should be provided. The budget committee does not make district policy. The budget committee's work is complete after it has approved a proposed budget. Our work is driven by the district's strategic plan. What you see here is what we call the placemat version of the plan. The board approved strategic plan sets our goals, work, and student achievement outcomes. We also post right up front our values. We budget our resources to achieve the goals contained within the district's strategic plan. As a team and as a board, we regularly refer to this document and update the board on our progress towards these goals. We also recognize that all of our students do not come to us having had the equal access to resources and educational support. Therefore, for the purpose of achieving goal number 1 contained in our strategic plan, which is to eliminate predictable disparities in achievement, we have adopted a framework that we ask ourselves when deploying resources. The framework is contained in the questions here. We refer to this as our equity lens. We can look to the school closures and distance education for illustrations of the use of this framework. We were fortunate through the bond to have the ability to deploy one-to-one devices to our students. But when we asked, will this work for all, we were reminded that not all of our students have internet access at home. Therefore, we've worked and continue to work to provide hotspot Wi-Fi access to all students, or to these students that need it. What a difference 6 weeks makes. This slide lists some of the key points contained in the March forecast. To show just how dramatically things have changed, here's the summary from the March forecast about the US economy pre-pandemic. And this is a quote. The developing coronavirus situation represents a risk to the outlook, but to date appears unlikely to derail the longest economic expansion on record. We debated about even referring to the March forecast given our present environment. However, we've been reminded that the state's fiscal reserves are stronger than they have been previously. And we'll talk about those next. The March forecast expected the state would end the 2019-21 biennium with nearly $3 billion in reserves, or approximately 14% of the general fund. Since the end of the last full session, there was also additional revenue for the state general fund. I'd like to take a moment and talk about the Rainy Day Fund and the Education Stability Fund, two funds that people hear about but don't often know exactly how they work. Established in 2007, the Rainy Day Fund is essentially a savings account for state government. Withdrawals can be made after a 3/5 vote of approval by the legislature if there is a decline in the general fund for the current or subsequent biennium budgets. There's a prolonged employment decline, or the governor declares an emergency. This fund was utilized in 2009 and 2010. The Education Stability Fund was created through a constitutional amendment approved by voters in 2002. The Educational Stability Fund receives 18% of net lottery proceeds deposited on a quarterly basis. The fund has similar requirements to the Rainy Day Fund. It was drawn upon to balance budgets in the 2009-11 and 2011-13 bienniums. We have not seen updates to the March forecast or estimates of what the June forecast may be. In fact, the Office of Economic Analysis reminded us in a recent post that they are a group of economists trying to translate a public health crisis into an economic forecast. However, we are hearing more and more the word bleak used to describe what is expected to be the next forecast. We're also being reminded that the state is better positioned for a downturn than in previous downturns. We aren't naive about the reserves, but it's important that we don't forget them when we consider the state's response to the coronavirus impact. As mentioned, the Office of Economic Analysis is working on the June forecast. We'd like to share some of their work here in the next slide. The Office of Economic Analysis is working on developing the latest revenue outlook. Previously, they've discussed a classic V or U-shaped recovery, and they are now discussing a square root recovery. Visually, the nature of the recession and recovery resembles the square root symbol. This outlook is gaining traction among forecasters and among the office's advisors. This recovery graph shows the sudden stop in the economy sends us into a severe recession overnight. Once the health situation improves, the restrictions begin to lift. This results in some initial bounce back in economic activity, although far from 100%. The office today doesn't have the answer to how big that rebound will be. The initial bounce back likely takes the economy from near depression level to something resembling a severe or bad recession. From there, the economy sees slow or moderate growth until the health situation is under control. Once public health issues are under control, then the economy may exhibit more of the classic U or V-shaped recovery, depending on a variety of factors, including how much permanent damage has been done through the recession, the number of firms that fail, how much labor is displaced, as well as consumer pent-up demand. Of course, monetary and fiscal policies will have a key role in the recovery. Clearly, the state will respond, but it will take time. And some federal money will help offset the impact of the pandemic, but it won't be enough. What we heard in a statewide meeting with COSA, the Confederation of School Administrators, so it's the professional organizations for folks like Heather and Gary and myself, and from ODE, the Oregon Department of Education, on Friday, just last Friday, was sobering. The state has a $1.8 billion deficit. It actually is closer to $3 billion, but they have $1.2 billion in reserves. The governor only has one means of dealing with the budget shortfall, and that's an across-the-board cut to all agencies. She has told departments to prepare a 8.5% reduction for the biennium. Unfortunately for us, we are almost halfway through the biennium, which really makes that a 17% reduction for schools for next year. We were told the total 17% reduction to the state school fund is equal to about $650 million. Sherwood receives roughly 0.8% of the state school fund. So that amounts to a $5.2 million reduction in funding for Sherwood. The legislature, however, has the ability to selectively change state agency budgets, and they have the state school and the school fund. They can also tap the rainy day fund and education stability fund. The Federal CARES Act is expected to bring approximately $121 million to Oregon, but unfortunately for our district, it is distributed based on Title I. This means we will only get about $137,000 from that fund. Our portion of that would be about 0.12%. And of course, the speakers on Friday did remind the attendees at that meeting that we are at the very beginning of a budget and political discussion. So there's a long ways to go from the $650 million and the $5.2 million for Sherwood. Christine, next slide, please. Thank you. For the Sherwood School District, the 2020-2021 year was not going to be a typical budget year, even before the coronavirus hit. We had a number of items that will be new to our budget development process. The first three bullets are of particular significance, and we'll talk about these in more detail in the following slides. The student investment account is part of the the Student Success Act passed by the 2019 legislative session. This was going to be the first significant increase in school funding in over 3 decades. This was money to be provided to schools outside of the state school fund, and the money had to be used in specific areas. Those include reducing class size, which could be including increased use of instructional assistants, well-rounded education, which could be early literacy in pre-K through grades 3, and broadening curricular offerings at all grade levels. Additional instructional time, which is either more hours or days, or summer and before or after school programs. And then health and safety, and this is to address social and emotional learning and student mental health and behavioral health. Very important is that these selected activities had to be supported by evidence-based criteria. So we had to be very thoughtful about how we would utilize those dollars. The Student Success Act is funded by a corporate activity tax, or a CAT tax. After many meetings with stakeholders, over 50, and community surveys, the district had settled on and submitted its application to the Department of Ed to deploy those funds. The plan would have allowed us to hire 32.5 additional positions and move 11.68 FTE from the general fund to the student investment account funded positions in order to maintain our current service level. The planned move of FTE to SIA funding from the general fund was in response to lower student enrollment, and that is something I will discuss here further in a couple more slides. In the meantime, we're hearing of interest by some citizens of Oregon in postponing, deferring, or reducing that corporate activity tax. We've been told that the state does not wish to do this. Regardless, district leadership, recognizing the changes in our economy and potential state funding changes, is developing contingencies to address reductions in the student investment account. Meanwhile, we have a large capital improvement bond that is changing the face of our district. The new high school is coming online, and it will require additional custodial and maintenance staff, as well as increases in utilities and insurance. This has been part of our long-term budgetary plan and is being implemented with the next budget. The additional transformation schools, as they get remodeled, will have some budgetary changes to those as well. Christine, thank you. For most of you, you know that for school districts, the most important factor driving the budget is student enrollment. Sherwood has used a company called Davis Demographics for 4 years now to help identify future enrollment numbers. Since the majority of district funding is based on the number of students we have in the district, having a solid idea of enrollment is critical to an accurate budget. We receive about $8,340 per student, though the count is weighted for certain categories of students, including those navigating poverty and those receiving special education services. The district goes through a multi-step process to determine how many students we anticipate will show up each year. That process involves Davis Demographics making multi-year projections based on birth rates, current households, and historical patterns of students moving in and out. In addition, the district works with our building staff and the community to get a better understanding of what's happening with enrollment in real time. Last year, we selected a conservative number of 5,108 students to build our budget on. This was 4 students less than we had the previous year. In reality, our fall enrollment this year was 5,031, or 77 students less than we budgeted for. Due to how state funding works, we were able to accommodate for this 1 year without needing to make immediate cuts. Compounding our problem, though, is the projections for the next few years are down significantly from previous years. This is in large part due to an anticipated expansion of homes along Brookman Road that is not happening in the expected timeframe. While we fully expect the homes to be built, it will be later than projected, and that leaves us with fewer students and less revenue over the next few years. The district has prepared a mitigation plan. As mentioned before, we plan to move 11.68 FTE, so that's 11.68 staff members, from the general fund to SIA supported positions. With the opening of the new high school, we have the ability to return to the practice of permitting out-of-district students to attend Sherwood. Transfers are limited to only students in grades 9 through 12 and limited to a maximum of 45 each year. Limiting the transfers to high school students or high school grades only allows us to manage the long-term enrollment changes effectively. In essence, we'll shorten the tail. So we limit the number of years we would be obligated to serve an out-of-district student by only taking them for a maximum of 4. I'm going to pause there and just see if there are any questions, because that enrollment piece is pretty critical to all these items are critical, but that's really important for us.
Hey, Jim, this is Jessica Adamson. I have a question.
Yes.
Have we talked to Davis about when they think they'll be able to give us a better indication of, and I know that we have a good sense of the decline going into 2020, but the fall of 2020, but kind of in those out years, when they may be able to give us a projection about how COVID is going to impact that long term, because there will be a net impact of this. I get that they're probably unlikely to be able to tell us in the next month or two of what that looks like. But as we look towards next fall, are they thinking that they may be able to share with us some thoughts?
I have not talked directly to David Katz about that question yet, but that is something that Phil and I will certainly do prior to our next meeting.
Great, thanks. I don't think it changes this budget really, because it's going to be a while until we have information back from them, and kind of any estimate that is coming out right now is just a huge question mark. So that's completely fair. I just, as we start thinking long term, it'd be helpful.
We will do that. Thank you very much for bringing that up. Sorry, I'm adjusting my table so I'm not staring into the sun and being washed out by the light. As nice as it is, I don't think it helps on the screen. So we'll move on to the planning slide unless there's other questions. Not hearing any. So COSA, again, the School Administrators Association, has provided some guidance that has confirmed our own plans. We will present you on June 1st with a budget based on what we know from the most recent ODE estimates. However, we expect the June revenue forecast will be bleak, and the proposed budget will require adjustments. Multiple contingency scenarios responding to the state school fund and/or Student Investment Act revisions will be prepared, evaluated, and ready to recommend when the impact becomes known. We're just about done. And there are only a couple items remaining in the slide deck to review the budget calendar and an opportunity for questions. But before we close, I'd like to acknowledge the challenge the pandemic presents and the lack of concrete information and our plan to respond. We knew the budget task the pandemic presented would be bleak and grim. Only last Friday did we really learn how to define bleak and grim. The task is more challenging as we will not know what the Oregon legislature and perhaps additional federal stimulus may bring into play to assist us by the time we're expected to pass a budget. We do not have the flexibility to wait until our financial picture becomes clear. We must have that adopted budget by June 30th. We've discussed how we would prepare a budget under these circumstances, and our approach was confirmed by ODE and COSA guidance. They basically said, build your budgets around the $9 billion presently in the state school fund for the 2019-21 biennium. And at the same time, be preparing contingency reductions in order to be able to quickly adjust when our funding scenario is finally known. We've already begun this process, and these scenarios will be ready and available as our funding is determined. We recognize that this approach puts each of you as budget committee members in a bit of an uncomfortable position, and you'll be asked to approve a budget that we acknowledge now we do not expect that we can actually fully execute. Yet, we will adjust the budget to the resources available. Thanks, Christine. Due to that level of uncertainty, as Heather mentioned before, we typically have this orientation earlier in the calendar year, and we typically have our first budget committee meeting earlier in the year. But we wanted to make sure that we delayed these meetings until we had a chance to see the June economic and revenue forecast, which is going to be released on May 20th. So we will have the first budget committee on June 1st, and a second meeting on June 8th, if necessary, and a June 10th meeting if necessary, with the board hearing the budget and adopting it and assessing taxes on June 24th in a public hearing. Let's go to the next slide. With that, I would like to open it up to any additional questions or comments.
Hey, Jim, this is Ryan. I have a question for you. So if the budget needs to change after June 30th, is the budget committee involved in those conversations, or how does that process actually work after June 30th?
By rule or by law, if the budget was to go up more than 10%, we would have to bring the budget committee back. If it's less or goes into a reduction, then the board can make those determinations and decisions.
Okay.
And I think Bill had a question. If I
I got that. Okay.
Yep. Thanks. So when you were talking about the data as far as future enrollments going down, quantify what that is. What are we seeing from a reduction?
Well, sorry, I should have been more clear. It's not that the enrollments are going down, although it did this year.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Not to that the enrollments are not to the level that was previously forecasted. Yeah. So for next year, I believe the number was about 150. Phil may have the actuals in front of him. It's in the few hundred range, but at $8,000 a kid, that's a significant chunk of money for us. I will also say that over about a 5-year, and this is of course kind of as Director Adamson pointed out, pre-pandemic, over 5 years, we would have returned to what they previously had projected for us. So it really was a short-term problem, but then we kind of quickly caught up to where we thought we'd be by 2025 is the year. So the growth is still expected to come. It's just coming later. What's the total enrollment?
This right now it's 5,031.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Jim, do you have any updates on how many kids have enrolled in Sherwood High from out of district transferring in at this point? Has that number changed at all?
I've not, yes. In our first open enrollment, we had 7 that applied. The last report I got was from 2 days after we opened it again, and we had an additional 3.
Okay.
So, unfortunately, that's been, sorry to say, about a week since I've got a report on that. I can.
Well, I'm sure it's not top of mind right now, so no problem.
Well, it should be there.
Hey Jim, this is Ryan again. So can you talk a little bit about how Sherwood School District looks compared to other districts kind of in the neighborhood? Like, I'm just curious if they're in a similar situation with regards to the budget from what you guys can tell.
I will certainly try to answer that. I think the superintendent and Phil might have additional information, but to my understanding, yes, we are seeing the same kinds of issues that our neighbors are. Many were also looking at using the Student Investment Act money to help maintain their current service levels by transferring some staff to their to SIA from their general fund. And then of course, they're all kind of going through these same issues with trying to pass a budget with uncertain revenue. And Christine, could I ask maybe that we close the slide deck so we can, thank you.
This is Heather. I'll tag onto that. So Ryan, our team in our various positions meet very regularly with people in those same positions in neighboring, certainly through Washington County and quite frequently throughout the 4-county area. And then I am involved in conversations at the state level as well. So we are really tuned in to what this looks like in other districts. And even just as recently as this afternoon in conversations with some Washington County superintendents, what it's looking like across the board. Various districts are taking approaches for reductions to the general fund, some targeting 5% reduction, and then what it's going to look like at 10% reduction, and then what it's going to look like at 15%. Some are just going straight to 10, and then 15. And there are, as Jim indicated, there are some districts that are in the same situation as we are. Hillsborough is a perfect example. They had identified about the same percentage of their SIA funds that they were going to direct towards the general fund right off the top to maintain current service level. And whether their problems were related to enrollment or not, I can't speak to that. I don't know that, but so that's a long-winded way of saying we're all looking at this in a very similar way based on guidance from the state.
So, Jim, in order to summarize your presentation, I wanted to make sure that I understood the main points. So, so the budget that you'll be presenting is basically based on the March revenue forecast pre-COVID, and we're just going to take it from there, understanding that things will adjust and change. Is that what I heard? It's not including this potential 17% cut that the initial impact that it sounded like you just received from the state maybe last week or something like that, right?
Yeah, the guidance from our state leaders, meaning COSA, OSBA, and others, is to build your budget on the $9 billion, but be ready to cut at various levels. They've suggested in $100 million increments up to that $650 million mark.
This is Heather, and those increments, those are basically $800,000 increments for us, and getting to about the $6 million point. So that's what that translates into at the local level. And just as an aside, we had a conversation about this with all of our administrative team this morning in our admin meeting. Yesterday, we talked about it in the equivalent to our version of cabinet meeting. But so all administrators have this news on their collective radar, and they know that we're going to be coming at them with some with activities that are going to have to really produce draconian cuts that are going to impact class size and programs. There's no way to skim around the edges to get to 6 million. We went through that activity just as recently as January as an entire administrative team to try to see how to attend to that general fund challenge that we have related to and because of enrollment. And we were able to glean a little over 200,000, excuse me, from around the edges, if you will. So there's no more, this isn't the kind of conversation where 3,000 in supplies here and another 2,000 there is gonna get us where we need to be. And there's no way to pretty that up. And that's what we're facing right now. And we're just they know, our administrative team knows that we're going to start preparing for that and hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst.
So just another question, just to make sure that I understood everything that was presented. So that 650 million potential cut, that is before any possible use of reserves and rainy day fund money. Although with our history, the understanding is there's no way they can make that all up. But that is a number that's before any use of reserves, correct?
This is Phil. That's correct. And that comes back to the point that Jim made earlier. There's the number we've had is a starting point. This is where the governor can begin. And then once the legislature is convened and begin acting, they are the one that have the authority and the ability to determine whether or not they want to tap into the rainy day fund and the education stability fund, and if so, how much. But they did not, in that 650 million, that money hasn't been factored in yet.
And at this point, it sounds like we should definitely presume no further help from the feds. I mean,
Mike, this is Jessica. I wouldn't make that assumption. I mean, I think we're going to have to build a budget based upon what we know we have in hand, and the guidance that we get from ODE. I think at this point in time that's going to be the best we can do is to follow ODE guidance. But you know, I've got folks on my team that are back in DC every day having conversations with folks about another CARES Act and what the next version looks like. Right now, state and local government assistance is on the table. I think this is a crisis happening everywhere at the same time. And unlike the federal government, every state and local government has to balance its budget. So there will get to be a tipping point at which congressional representatives, no matter where they're from, will have to look their constituents in the eye and explain why they didn't do anything to help with school closures or with fire and police or with a variety of other things. So I can tell you, based upon conversations that I've been part of with the federal delegation, they're very strongly in favor of additional state and local assistance. So our 7-member delegation is working on this issue. Some priorities are higher than others, especially different in District 2. But I think that there is, will eventually be a consensus that they need to do something. What that flexibility looks like, what other conditions come with it, is a constantly changing thing. And if you want to get whipsawed around, just, you know, watch TV for a while, like watch the news channel, and you'll get kind of seasick with how fast people go back and forth. But I think that there will be federal funding at some point. When that comes is unknown. How soon the state makes decisions about closure is unknown. What we look like state by state is going to be very different. The closure of businesses in Washington was very different than that in Oregon. So the economic impact won't look even state to state. So there's, I think, a lot of unknowns at this point in time that we're just going to have to get real comfortable with uncertainty for a while. But the other thing about the 8.5% targets, those are real exercises to try and identify where to cut. It is rare for usually those cuts are done in chunks and designed to provide legislators and the governor's office with options, because no one's going to take an across the board 17% cut across all agencies. That's just not going to happen. But in some agencies, there will be more cut than others. In some agencies, the curtailment of activity will be stronger than others. But for example, in the employment department, you're going to be spending a lot more than you did before because there's so many people unemployed. In Medicaid, you're going to be spending a lot more than you did before because people are all of a sudden without health insurance and transitioning to Medicaid. So some agencies are going to get different treatment. Education has historically been protected. The last time we went through the Great Recession, I was working for the Speaker of the House and went through this whole exercise. The goal of those lists is to give people options so that when the legislature comes in or when the emergency board meets, they can pick and choose and give different directions. So I think we need to be ready for that if that becomes a reality, if this drags out longer than we think, if the bounce back isn't as high as we think, there is no model, no economic model for this. But I think we also need to know that the last thing that legislators like to cut is K-12 education. So we will, we are in a better position than some, but I think sharing as we get closer to having documents where we can share the impact at each one of those $100 million increments with Representative Neron and Senator Thatcher, I think the sooner we can start communicating with them and communicating to let them know that, for example, of the $121 million, we're getting $137,000. So there is a disparity in treatment to our district, not because of just because of the funding formula. The more that we can let them know, the better they can advocate on our behalf.
And I just want to reiterate what you said. I mean, for all of us here, I think our responsibility as citizens is to pay attention to what's going on in Salem and Washington and to contact our representatives in order to, be advocates for our own kids and our education in our district. I mean, I think that's part of the job that we serve on this board. So thank you very much for the update, Jessica.
Yeah. Thank you both. That's good coaching. So obviously there's a lot to digest here. Are there additional questions that people have for Jim and Phil related to the budget? No hand raising?
Hey, Phil, or Jim, when do we get the final PERS rate? I know that at the end of the year, it was looking like we might be flat, which would be a blessing, especially now, but when do we get that final rate set? Is it July 1?
This is Phil. And actually, I would expect to see it come out in the fall sometime, say about September. I think it comes out and then it goes into effect. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jessica. I'm sorry. Were you gonna?
Oh, no, I just was saying thanks.
So following up on PERS, I was thinking about that. So it sounds like the rate will be set for this year, but obviously depending on the severity of this recession, PERS can be up for another big increase in the next 3-4 years, which is going to be affecting our budgets for the next 5 or 6 years. This whole COVID thing. Any comments on that? Any expectations of how long until we start to feel the PERS increases? Probably not this biennium, but definitely the next one. Or
This is Phil. New rates will be available for the next biennium. So we do have fixed rates going into the 2021 school year. Concerning how much the rates may go up, I haven't seen or heard anything saying a particular rate amount, other than one thing that I did hear is that in the last session or at some point, the PERS started investing, and this is my own language, but they began to stratify based on the age of the members in PERS, how they were investing money. So older people on the older end, they were investing more conservatively, and some of the younger people that still had quite a ways to go to retirement that had begun investing a little less conservatively. And they said having put that in place protected the loss in value a little bit. So they were saying that they don't think the loss in value under this formula is going to be as great as it would be had they not implemented these changes. So I hope that's clear.
Thank you. Are there any other questions before we adjourn? Or any comments?
Sue, this is Roger. Can I say something?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. So I feel a little bit torn about this. In my role at work as a budget approver, I would never, ever approve a budget that I knew was going to be materially wrong. The one thing we know about any forecast is that it's wrong. That's the only thing we know about any forecast with certainty. And of course, we knew the March forecast was going to be wrong as well. But I feel a little bit torn about this because I feel like with the legal requirement to pass a budget, that sort of ties our hands. So at this point in time, I guess my question is, if we approve the budget based on the March forecast, when do the balance of the funds start to get spent with significance, and what guidance around spending is going to be given to the district in the meantime around curtailing expenses? You're muted.
Sorry, I was on mute. To answer the first part of your question, Roger, about when will the majority of our expenditures occur, that really starts with September as we have staff come back. And if you might recall from previous years that 82 to 84% of our entire budget is staff. And so as we start the new school year, and that's when the new round of checks for that particular fiscal year start rolling out, that's the majority of our spending.
And can I jump in here?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah.
Jessica.
Yeah, I also think it's important to know, Roger, that in terms of expenditures this year, under an executive order, both executive orders that have been implemented for schools, the district was required as part of those executive orders, in order to receive the state school fund dollars that we normally get. We were required to continue to pay everyone, working from home, working from in the building, as all the same. So no real ability of the district, and again, directed by the governor, to curtail expenses beyond those that we can control. So supply costs have gone down a bit. We're not using as much water and heat and all of that, but there are expenses unique to COVID that we're picking up and spending, hopefully tracking some of those so that if we're ever in a reimbursement position that we can get that money back. Thank you, Jim, for nodding, Heather for nodding. But the base expenditures that a district would have, we have been required by state government, which is our primary funding source, to continue to pay as though we were in school and fully operational. So no real ability to control those costs like other businesses would right now, that would try and conserve cash and do staff reductions and look at, all right, what does it mean to adjust schedules and do all that? We can do none of that at this point.
I would add 2 items. One, without direction, our leadership team, with guidance from our superintendent, initiated a spending chill or a spending frost. It's not quite a spending freeze, but we are being very cautious with any additional dollars that we need to expend right now, and saying no to certain things that are maybe not the highest priority. The other thing, it was mentioned that we're saving some on water and utilities. We are. The other major savings that we're getting right now by not having kids in schools and not having teachers there is we're not paying for subs. So we do have some savings through the remainder of the school year from being not operating out of our buildings. And those would flow through kind of our usual end of year process, ending fund balance, into next year. So 2 areas that we're trying to save some money with.
And Jim, I want to be really clear, especially since I now remember this is being streamed online. So for anybody watching, I do not object at all to paying teachers and all the folks, and they are doing a ton of work to make all of this, all of the distance learning components work, and are doing a lot, many of them with their own kids at home and trying to do that. So I don't want that to sound like we don't value or didn't want to pay, but it's not as though the district has options relative to that either. And so that's a challenging act. Whereas, in private business, we were able to make some pretty quick decisions to try and conserve cash. That's not the reality for the district.
Yeah, we definitely operate with a different set of rules than private businesses do. And you are absolutely right. We have a staff across the board that is working very hard to provide a great education to kids in trying times. And that's our instructional assistants, it's our food service folks, our bus drivers, it's everybody, including teachers and the administrative staff. So yeah, they're all valued and they're all appreciated.
Jim, it would be really interesting to know, and maybe this is something that can bring back at a future board meeting, what in our overall run rate, what the balance of expenditures look like. So again, assuming salary, which is 85% of our expense, but what's of the remaining 15, how much are we able to reduce, and what does that kind of overall, like, month by month cost saving look like, because if we get back into this and have a second wave in the fall or the winter, we may be back in this position. There may be some savings gleaned from that. I mean, God forbid we're back into that, because that would be just a disaster. That would make that curve look more like a W than it would look like a square root, right? But if that occurs, it'd be useful to know kind of what the finance implication of that would be, and what we might expect to see in come fall, winter, if that occurs.
That's a great question. Phil and I will get to work on that afterwards. I do want to come back to one point you made earlier, Director Adamson, about whether or not we're tracking COVID expenses or expenditures. And we've set up a separate account number. And so things like additional coolers that we needed to provide lunches at remote sites, those kinds of expenditures are coming from that account, so we can keep track. And in the future, if there's reimbursement, we'll attempt to get that.
That's fantastic. There's a big chunk of federal dollars that have come to the state now as part of CARES 1 that can only be used to reimburse for COVID expenses. They can't be used more broadly for general revenue loss expenses. And my guess is they will run out of things to spend that money on at a state level, and there may be an opportunity for school district to reimburse against that large fund.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Okay. Thank you, Jim and Phil and team. So with that, if no one has anything else to add, we will go ahead and adjourn until June 1st. And I sincerely hope we are all meeting in person in a small group, even if we're a little bit social distance, whatever that may look like. But thank you all for serving on this committee, and we appreciate it. Stay healthy, and we'll be in touch again soon. Have a good night.
Thanks, Sue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care. Have a good night.
Bye.